Man's Search of Meaning is the story of the author, Viktor Frankl, and his grim stories of life in various Nazi concentration camps. He explains how he discovered his concept of logotherapy. He uses various examples from his time in these concentration camps in varied grim detail to explain the fundamental concepts of logotherapy. He explains what it means to ask questions such as, why are we here? What are we doing? And why does man exist and attempt to accomplish goals? The stories he tells will not only help you understand his discoveries of psychology, but will also give you a new perspective on life, as well as death. Join me as I explain the wonders of the story, Man's Search for Meaning. The book has two primary sections. The first contains the author's personal experiences within the concentration camps, while the second explains the logotherapy in a nutshell. The first section of the story is without a doubt one of the most impactful things I've ever read. The pain he would have to endure to simply write down these experiences, let alone survive them, is more than I can attempt to even fathom. As he tells these stories, he explains the stages a prisoner would go through in camps such as Auschwitz. He learned that a man can endure things that were thought impossible, such as lack of sleep and food. He also discovered that to survive in such a place, you would become desensitized to death, and sometimes do anything to make your life more comfortable. The capos are an example of this. These prisoners were trusted and given work enforcing the other prisoners. These capos were sometimes even more ruthless than the SS guards. In a very fascinating section of his stories, he also spoke of how prisoners would have to develop a sense of humor to help them get through their torments. He had made a deal with one of his fellow prisoners to every day come up with a funny situation that could happen after the war was over and they were perhaps liberated. For example, one of the men forecasted that during a meal one day with his family, as soup was being distributed, he would forget himself and ask the hostess to ladle it from the bottom to get the proper portion that had a few peas and much less water. I could continue to recount stories that the author tells, but I think that for best effect, you'll need to read it yourself. The second section of the book is the author's way of describing and explaining exactly what he had gathered from his experiences. I think the best way to summarize this section is to read Viktor Frankl's overview of exactly what logotherapy is. Logotherapy focuses rather on the future, that is to say, on the meanings to be fulfilled by the patient in his future. Logotherapy, indeed, is a meaning-centered psychotherapy. At the same time, logotherapy defocuses all of the vicious circle, formations, and feedback mechanisms which play such a great role in the development of neurosis. Thus, the typical self-centeredness of the neurotic is broken up instead of being continually fostered and reinforced. This kind of statement is an oversimplification, yet in logotherapy, the patient is actually confronted with and reoriented toward the meaning of his life, and to make him aware of this meaning can contribute much to his ability to overcome his neurosis. It may seem lazy that I would reread something that is from the text. But I honestly do not think there was any other proper way to describe exactly what the author discovered and what he contributed to psychology as it is today. This way of thinking, I have noticed, exists even with counselors and therapists that I've seen myself. I wouldn't have read this book if it hadn't been recommended by one. An evaluation is essentially giving something value based on your own standards. This book is nothing short of remarkable and life-changing. As I stated before, the stories told will not only help you understand the information the author provides, but also grant you perspective on life and death and everyday life. The story truly shows the reader what it means to find that silver lining and remain optimistic despite things being rather difficult. I found the story very empowering, knowing that it was possible to find joy in an environment as terrible as the author describes. As I look back at the stories and tales depicted, I almost feel accomplished to have completed the journey in reading them and being able to learn from them. I think that anyone could benefit from reading this book, so long as they are mature enough to wrap their heads around the concept, as well as mature enough to accept the concept and accept everything that can be taught. This book is easily one of the most impactful stories I've ever read, one of the most impactful pieces of literature I've ever experienced. I think that anybody that ever questions the way things are in the world should go find this book and experience it for themselves. Only then will you really understand. Will you really understand what I mean when I say these things? I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and that in your evaluation it will live up to your standards. Farewell, and feel free to listen to the remaining outro to the song that I have mixed just for this that you are hearing now.